Hey, so today we're going to be talking about the Big Bang and some other BS.
The, fir- the first rule of Insight Club is you don't talk about Insight Club. You do Insight Club. The second rule of Insight Club is the only assumptions we make about one another are that we all want happiness and we all want to avoid suffering. The third rule of Insight Club is you check all your other assumptions at the door. We hope these conversations will bring you insights that incite you to action. Welcome to Insight Club.
Welcome back to Insight Club. The Big Bang and other BS. So it's really interesting. We wanted to talk about this, and we decided to, before new articles started coming out saying, "Oh no, the Big Bang hasn't been disproved at all." If you haven't been following the story, just do a quick search for Big Bang wrong online. But what happened basically was somebody was quoted out of context and somebody else ran with a story that was like, oh, now all scientists think that the Big Bang is not true and it's not supported. But we want to talk about this like for a deeper reason, because the place that the Big Bang holds, I think, in our imagination is a really beautiful example of the way we're indoctrinated to think about science and relate to science. When I was a kid, this was just taught as fact. Was this taught as fact, the Big Bang, when you were in school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want even to give a disclaimer here.
Yeah.
We're not scientists, so we're talking from Lame's point of view as well. And yes, it was taught as the truth in here as well. And this is one thing that I was always very curious, and I know that you as well, Megan. And when I got to that point, like, but this is a theory. So if theories are not like proven facts, are a possibility, a model with which scientists use to be able to calculate a lot of other things that in this model of possibility works and serves a purpose for their work. It's not a dogma effect, which is the point that we're bringing here. Like the way it was taught for me, and I imagine for you as well, it was almost as if like this is now the truth in place of creationism, which is the is it creationism?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Like the intelligent design, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of things that science took and like so the dogma from religion is not true and we're going to replace with another dogma instead of opening the space for conversation.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. Space for conversation. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack here. I disagree though, Lace. I disagree with you. I think we are scientists, and I think this actually gets to the root of the problem. I am not somebody who has looked at the data that we're getting from what's this thing called the James Webb Space Telescope. Okay. So that's the distinction I want to make. I'm not looking at data, but I think all humans have the capacity to be scientists. And that what we forget is that the scientific, I remember reading Francis Bacon and going like, what's the big deal? Because I was so steeped from the time I was little in this idea of the scientific method, I couldn't imagine a time in human history before it. It was unimaginable to me, right? So this idea of the scientific method it has permeated our whole lives. And what it is described as, and when it works, is you notice something in the world and it sparks your curiosity. So you ask a question. That's the first step of the scientific method. You're like, oh, I wonder why this happens. And then you pose a hypothesis. Sometimes you have to do a little research. You're like, I don't know anything about this. So I'm going to do a little research. And then my hypothesis is, I think this effect happens because of this. And then you conduct trials, you conduct experiments, and there's a lot of intelligence that has to go into designing an experiment to control the variables and really make sure that you're testing your hypothesis. There's a lot of skill that goes into it. So of course you can be a specialist. Like I'm a lot being cheeky when I say I disagree and we are scientists, because obviously this is a specialty. This is a training, like being a master musician, right?
Yeah.
When you're trained as a scientist, you get really, really good at setting up experiments and being able to go, no, I'm isolating for this variable and I'm controlling everything else. And this is what would tell us whether our hypothesis is correct or not. Then you get the results, the data from your hypothesis. And again, with curiosity, you go, oh, well, now let's do an analysis. Was our hypothesis correct or not, right? This is the scientific method, and this is what all people are capable of doing. That is not science with a capital S that we all are told to follow and believe.
That's the point. You see, this is the incitation, the insight that we're bringing here.
Yeah. So,
And the moment you put a follow in something, there's something wrong there.
yeah, put your faith in it. So, like I wish I were better at scientific thinking. I mean, I find it fascinating. When I was a classroom teacher and the fifth graders had to design their own science projects, I was kind of at the same level they were, like this is just not how my brain really thinks. But I loved seeing their creativity with coming up with, I have this question about the world that I want to answer, and they were 10 and 11-year-olds. So it was things like, which bread will grow mold faster? And I remember this one kid, she was so bright. And she's like, which bread will grow mold faster? And there was like the kind of, from the bakery bread and the from the supermarket bread. And the from the supermarket bread had more sugar. And she was like, I think that one will grow mold faster because I know bacteria eat sugar, and she made this great hypothesis. Turns out it was the other way around. And then you go, oh, okay, well, why is that? The sugar, it was actually acting as a preservative, and it's, what do bacteria eat? It led to all these other
and questions. The fact that mold is not bacteria.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah. So there you go. That shows you my.
No, but it makes sense. She was thinking of like, bacteria, but mold is actually fungus. So
that shows you my level of knowledge about biology. Yeah. And so we get this big like, oh, aha moment, right?
Yeah.
And so
all led by curiosity.
Yeah, that is the activity. You've heard me say this multiple times. I think we should stop using the term science because people mistakenly equate that with a body of knowledge that we're now positive is true, and instead replace it by saying the scientific method or scientific inquiry, which is an action, right? And is a way of knowing, but not the only way of knowing. But that's what like we want our scientists to be engaged in. Like scientists, you would think would be the most curious, most life-affirming people because they're constantly engaged in this deeper understanding of like, oh, mold is not a bacteria, it's a fungus. Anything a fifth grader should know, but I still don't know it. So like, what if, and just I'm curious for anybody listening, like, is that your sense of how science or scientific inquiry is being conducted in our modern world?
That's a great question. Yeah.
So then let's come back to this Big Bang, which we were all taught. And this idea of, this idea of a working theory my understanding is a scientific theory is a synthesis where it's like, these are the data we've seen. And one story, one narrative that would make sense of these data is the following, right? So we're building the theory based on data, but also based on an interpretation. Where like we keep seeing these things happen. So people were looking at the universe seemed to be expanding and galaxies were behaving in this way. They're like, oh, what would make sense of this all is that way back, billions of years ago, everything was concentrated into like this tiny point. It exploded, and then ever since it's been moving outward, right? Okay, so here's where things get funny, because that theory is based on what we observe. And then we start observing things that don't support that theory. So what should we do then as responsible, curious people? Say, this may not be the story. This may not be the narrative that actually makes sense of these data. But what do we do instead? Those data are not the data you need to be looking at.
So basically, I want to give some examples thinking of this. Like, if, let's say I usually wake up at 6 a.m. and the sun is there, up already. And one day there I get up and there's no sun. Should I think it's not the morning then because the sun is not there? Or should I ask more questions? Like, maybe there's a cloud covering it. Maybe we are in the winter and the sun comes up a little bit later. Maybe I woke up in the wrong time. Maybe I'm waking up in the middle of the night and my clock is not working properly. I would ask all these questions, right?
Yeah.
Why it would be weird to think, no, but there's something wrong with the sun because it's not there. It should be there. So I feel like this is like, we would ask more questions in any situation, normal situation. Why do we think that in science, something that was put in there needs to continue being that?
Yeah. Here's my other big beef with the Big Bang. As theories go, it is really, really lacking, right? If somebody gave you this explanation, like your friends explaining to you, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm late because of this," you'd be like, "Can you fill in more details? What caused that big explosion? What happened in the moment before that big explosion? Where did all this stuff come from that was in that pinpoint?" Like, there are so many questions that one could and should ask.
What existed before that big explosion?
Yeah, like, this explanation is actually really, really lacking in any kind of common sense, satisfying that, that we actually know something. It's a pretty light explanation. And I'm gonna misquote Grady, but he always says, like, basically cosmetologists say, just grant me this one miracle and I can explain everything else in the universe. Like, that's basically what they're saying about the Big Bang. Just give me this one miracle and then I can explain everything else. Now, I got no problem with miracles, but the reason I have big beef is because the presentation of the Big Bang, and now we're at a point, so it's like, it may still be the best theory we have. I haven't been following the pictures from the telescope at all. So it might totally still be the best kind of, make sense story. And that one scientist who was misquoted was like, "Oh yeah, I wasn't saying that about the Big Bang, that I've been wrong about everything. I was saying about the way galaxies grow," or something like this. So, maybe it still is the thing that makes the most sense to describe it. But my big beef is that it is presented as, now we know and now we have an explanation.
Mm.
But and as you were saying, it's brought into not just replace, but to this mean thing kids do where you pull somebody's pants down to embarrass them in public?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what this, is used to do to an idea that there's any kind of, creation or connection or like a force that, like a singular consciousness or God or anything else. It's not just we disagree. It's like we're going to pull down your pants in public and shame you, right? If you think that. You go, "Oh, you believe in magic and things that don't make sense." Well, you're telling me you have no idea what caused some explosion, but that you don't want me to worry about that because now everything else. So it's this idea that instead of actually investigating, we're simply creating material models and then being told that that material model is the answer. Now, scientific inquiry is only one way of knowing things. So my hypothesis is that how the universe began is not a question that can be answered by science. And that doesn't bother me. It could be answered in some other way, but scientific inquiry that relies on observation is probably not the way we can answer this question. But no, it's like, no, I will control all of the knowledge. I can know everything.
And actually, we're not even sure if there's only this universe. There's the theory about multi-universes, there's string theory, there's uh, simulation theory, there's all of these other things
Yeah.
that are not as talked or as accounted for because this is the model that is accepted and it's
Yeah.
taken as the truth.
And so I was just like reading an article on what is it? It's space.com about this. I was like, I should get a little bit more information about this whole Big Bang thing and whether it was, blown to smithereens or not. And I was so fascinated and triggered because throughout this article, they kept using the terms pseudoscience, disinformation, people who can't tell fact from fiction. They were basically saying, oh, there are just some people who can't tell fact from fiction. What a demeaning way to categorize people. And so the article makes me less convinced about everything they're saying. The whole point of the article is like, the Big Bang is not wrong, and it was pseudoscience and disinformation and people who can't tell fact from fiction that said it. Again, I haven't looked at any of the pictures. Even if I looked at them, I'm not trained to interpret them. I wouldn't know what the heck I was looking at or what it meant. So I know I don't know. What I do know is that this behavior of saying the thing we told you before that was true, you have to believe it because if you don't, it's pseudoscience and disinformation. That my spidey sense just goes into high alert. I'm like, if you can't present data and an explanation that will help me see why what you're saying is true, and instead you have to just attack people, I'm not inclined to believe you.
Yeah, me and Megan, we were talking just before hopping in here because we agreed to talk only 5 minutes before jumping here, so we share everything with you. That usually when people use attacks like this ad hominem calling you something to try to prove their point, that means there's something to hide or they're completely, and we've even talked about in other episodes that when you're uncertain of something, that's when you're going to attack. Right?
Yes, yes.
So
And trying to create the certainty by going, well, those people must just be morons who can't tell fact from fiction. And I'm
when,
also like, what's at stake here? Well, the way I mean, this is a whole Russell Brand did
a
a
worldview, the way of seeing the world, all the beliefs about time even
yeah.
are based on.
But also people's careers and a large amount of money is at stake. And Russell Brand did a really fabulous video around like science in America and the funding streams, it's depressing as heck to watch. But you know, he's showing like a couple of, you know, big things that have been in the news, you know, science wise, and where the money's coming from. And basically you see that if somebody doesn't decide to put a lot of money towards something, it doesn't get studied. And the reason usually they're putting a lot of money towards something is because they expect to make a profit on the other end. So our sense that, well, we're the scientists and inquiry and all this stuff, I mean, it's all ruled by whether somebody can make a profit. People's careers are at stake. So yeah, who benefits from all of us being bullied into believing in the Big Bang?
Well, let me throw another BS here, since we're talking about the funding of of science. The whole you're gonna have to help me here, Megan, because I might not remember the word in English, but the whole food pyramid. How do you call that?
Oh, the food pyramid. Yeah, exactly.
Pyramid. Yep. Yeah. All of that thing was based on that Kellogg's. Can I say the name? Founding. To put that cereal in the bottom.
Wow. Amazing.
Which often has the sugar that is in the top of the pyramid, which is one of the few things that's correct. It's not scientifically proven that cereal and grains is the best thing for you to eat. And you
actually the opposite. I just finished reading a really great book called Glucose Revolution. And
it's funny that the greens and fruits and so on are up. So like,
yeah. Well, in the United States, I mean, this is like, what? Who thought of this? In the United States, we have an organization that is responsible for both the regulation and promotion of the food industry. The USDA, the US Department of Agriculture, is responsible to regulate and also to promote. I'm like, that's a big conflict of interest. Like, well, we're responsible. We got to make these guys more money. Oh, but grains, they don't really do much good for you. But we got to tell people. And it's
that makes money. Okay, let's put it in the bottom of the.
There has never been, to my knowledge, a public, you know, a press conference where somebody like the head of the USDA came out and said, hey, you guys, you know, we're so sorry. We got it wrong. Please don't be using the food pyramid anymore. Instead, they just kind of backpedaled. And now if you look, they don't show it on many things, but in the few places you find it, they've created a triangle. So it still looks like the pyramid. And then they put these like slices in. So it's a completely different thing, right? You know, the idea of a pyramid is a wide base and a little top. So completely different structure. Doesn't make any sense to have it be a triangle, but they just kept it that way. So we didn't change our minds. It's still the same.
It's the Mandela effect. It was never that way.
Oh my gosh. I just was watching a podcast about the Mandela effect, and, you know, I'm like, okay, yes, it hurts my brain. But there was one that hurt my brain so bad where I don't know if this is a thing outside the United States, but there was this like publishers clearinghouse where you could win this big prize and win a lot of money. And the spokesperson for it was Ed McMahon, who was also like the kind of co-host or the sidekick on the Johnny Carson show. And one of the Mandela effects is that Publishers Clearinghouse is like, Ed McMahon has never been our spokesperson. I'm like, I can't. Some of the other ones, I'm like, okay, Mandela's both alive and dead, and not. But that one, my brain just is like, you're changing reality. But it was a really neat podcast. It was actually a quantum physicist, and she was very at peace with the Mandela effect because she was like, look, you know, this is what we should expect from quantum physics. Observation changes reality. And whether it's because there are multiple universes or it's because of the I was going to say collapsing, but that might not be the right term. The like, it coalesces, right? Like something's in a superposition, and then once it's observed, it condenses, coalesces. It's some C word. So there are different operating theories, which is interesting. In quantum physics, this is an area where you have different operating theories and nobody's going to war with each other.
And that's exactly where I wanted to come without even noticing, because what if there is a place where the Big Bang maybe made sense, and through observation, something else is like kind of replacing it, or like maybe not replacing, but maybe both exist in parallel realities.
Yeah.
What if the universe is both expanding and not expanding at all in different parallel realities?
Yeah.
What if in maybe not parallel realities, even maybe what if it's not even parallel realities? What if we are observing from different dimensions, and in different dimensions different things can be observed? Because if the Big Bang Theory explains time, for example, and time only exists in the 3D, and we're actually moving into the 5D or 4D or whatever it is from a eternal point of view, then the universe can't be expanding because time doesn't exist. Those are the questions I want to hear asked.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like this feeling, I mean, when you're asking all those questions, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I want to know. I just want to keep exploring." And that is the exact opposite feeling I have when I'm hearing science. Right? And oh, this is something that we were chatting about like off air last time. Okay, here's a really simple example of how we're told to trust science and it's huge BS. It's only in the last like couple decades or so that anybody even bothered to make sure that women were included in clinical trials of medications. Like for decades, it was, well, we tested it on men. I mean, it should work on women too. What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong with a pregnant woman that is carrying another life
Oh
inside?
my gosh. But even just acknowledging like completely different hormonal system,
Yeah.
different internal organs, like, you know, that is rubbish science to say, well, we've tested it on this group and now we're just assuming, right? Our whole show is about assumptions and just noticing where they are. And I'm so grateful that there are medications and there are people who, have like studied biology and chemistry. And if I had some, like big kaflooey in my internal organs, like they could help me out with it. I love that. And people who want to dedicate their lives to, studying one little bacteria and figuring out how can we like be less harmed by this thing. Like Louis Pasteur. Thank you. Right? There are so many wonderful ways in which our lives are impacted by people who, dedicate themselves to scientific inquiry. And we need to be so mindful not to create science as our new dogma, to not give it the power of the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, for example, where it's like, you are a heretic and you're being burned at the stake because you did not believe the expert, who told you this. And then we do a little digging and you're like, it turns out the expert never tested this medication on half the population. Or it happens by race too. Like a lot of medications, they've only been tested on white people. And it's like you have no clue of somebody's like, different ancestral or ethnic, like makeup and how the medication. And we're like, well, we just assumed that. That's not how scientific inquiry works. We just assumed.
It can act differently even in different people who live in different regions of the world because of different environment and all this stuff.
Yeah. So that's my big beef. Did you hear the other story though that's circulating this week about quantum physics?
Not quantum physics. I thought you were going to talk about the aliens, but okay.
No, about entangled particles.
No, I
Oh,
haven't.
okay. Oh my God. This is like so, so cool. And it's something that's existed for a while that is just coming on my radar. And it's funny because it came onto my radar because of something that was misrepresented. It wasn't true. So this photograph was released of a yin yang, and the headline on it was like, scientists have finally taken a picture of entangled particles, and this is what it looks like. Well, that's not true at all. Scientists for a while have been using entangled particles to take pictures of things you can't see, which is so freaking cool because you send like two entangled particles and one goes like through the object or through the image and one goes just to be observed. And then like where they disagree, it shows like basically creates like a negative space image of the thing that you sent it through. It's
Wow.
called ghost photography, and it's amazingly cool. And so one of the things they took a ghost image of was a yin yang symbol. So the picture that was being shown was I think it's called a ghost photograph of an actual yin yang symbol. So it was like this kind of, moment where it was like, oh my God, what? Did we just see the nature of the universe? But the thing itself, I'm like, this is amazing. They're using entangled particles so that we can't see this thing over here because it's too small, or if you bounce photons off of it, you change it, whatever it is. But by matching up the differences between the particle that's gone through the image and this one over here, then the negative space comes out and you can like see what is there. I'm like, that is amazing. And there are still people walking around going like, entangled particles. Einstein was like, oh, spooky action at a distance, whatever, I don't want to live in that world. And as brilliant as he was and as many gifts as he gave us, you could still see that dogma and that bias of, I don't want to live in that world, right? He's like, I don't want to live in a world where God plays dice.
Mm.
But like the entangled particles are so real, you can actually use them to, which I guess has been around for a little while, but the innovation was now they're able to do it like really quickly and you get results back in a matter of minutes rather than like days or months.
They're able to actually use the knowledge and not just observe it,
Yeah.
which is what science should be about. Like, you question and try and test until you are able to do something about it, and not just understand but actually do something about it.
But I'm fascinated at this juxtaposition, right? Because on the one hand, the Big Bang is maybe the best fit, maybe not the best fit, I'm still not sure, but is a presentation of like, maybe this is how it happened for the things we observe. And you cannot ever verify it. That's the thing about a theory. You can't go back and test it, because to do the experiment, you would need to go back to that
Don't we have the time machine yet?
point. No, possibly it's coming. But right, so you can't have an empirical experiment. So on the one hand, that is being protected at all costs. We will damage your career and call you lots of names if you do not believe in this. On the other hand, this like entangled particles exist to the extent that we can use them for shit, and people are still like, this is not true, this is quantum physics, is just made up stuff. And okay.
Message delivered. Basically, it's whatever I believe, but I'm not religious. That's the message.
Oh wait, say more about that. I'm not sure I followed.
People with like that tell you to believe in science, they often like, they're not religious, they're not spiritual, they're either atheists or they question everything. Yet they want you to believe in science.
Yeah.
And what is to believe in science? It shouldn't be a belief, it should be at the minimum a question. Like a mode of view of being curious and questioning everything.
Yeah, well, and then there are moments where we do get an explanation, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, "Oh, actually, the mold grows faster on this bread. Ah, and it's because a mold is a fungus." It's like there can be knowledge that works. I mean, ultimately, we don't know the nature of our reality, but there
And
can be
yet there
things that
will
we can
be variables.
say again, there can be variables.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there will be variables. So even if we think like, okay, this mold grows faster in this kind of bread, uh, will it continue being true if something else is added, like a preservative or whatever it is? So
sure.
there are variables that,
Absolutely.
yeah, there's always
Absolutely.
more to learn, even when we get to a conclusion.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, scientific inquiry and the technology that it leads to is really fabulous for, like, a Newtonian level of things. Like, when I go to drive across a bridge, let's say, I don't sit there and have an existential crisis and go like, "I wonder if the theories that make this bridge are true," right? Like, there's a level of reality where I'm totally willing to suspend my curiosity about what's really true. Like, there's a level of material reality where I'm fine with driving across the bridge, flying in an airplane. These things, like, I've observed work again and again and again and again and again. I'm like, cool. I'm going to just basically, I am taking them on faith, right? Because I don't know what underlies. But the deeper we look, the more we see that the reality we perceive and believe we perceive is total BS.
Yeah.
Like, there's no such thing as matter. It's like it's all just energy at a vibration. And I'm like, I think I'm sitting on a chair. I feel like I can put my hands on my desk. And I am happy to live in reality
Yeah.
and interact with things in that way. But when it comes to claims around the true nature of things, like, don't give me that BS. Newtonian physics works for big things. It works for billiard balls and planes, and it does not govern. It does not work for smaller things.
Yeah. Uh, and thank God that we get to, and I'm saying God, it's funny. Anyway, that we get to trust and get on a plane instead of be thinking like, is this entangled with something else that is going to make it
Yeah.
fall?
Yeah.
Yet, that's great. The thing that we're talking here is that when you are a scientist conducting experiments, you can't just assume
Yeah.
things.
And bringing out, like, I mean, maybe everything requires belief and everything requires faith was kind of the direction I was going in, and I'm okay with that. And some things it's a lot easier to believe in because I've seen them again and again, like driving over the bridge or being in an airplane. And other things I'm like, well, I haven't seen that, and it's harder for me to believe in it. Like, I'm not close to it, but it's harder for me to believe in it. I don't have that pathway. But the brazenness, the audacity, the BS in people saying, "Well, faith is stupid, and I know for certain what happened 14 plus billion years ago, and if you don't believe me, then you must be a dum dum who can't tell fact from fiction." Why did we ever put those morons in charge? Like,
That's the $1 billion question. If we can answer that, I bet that we can reconcile the Big Bang with whatever other theory that's coming.
oh my goodness.
Oh.
Oh my goodness. I like this. It's helpful because noticing my own ire around this is a reminder, like, oh, I don't want to be in that space. You know, here I am wanting to assert what I think is true because I'm feeling threatened and attacked by somebody else asserting what they think is true. And so I guess ultimately this is a beautiful reminder for me to go, oh, I'm just slipping into that headbutting egoic battle, right? I'm calling out somebody else for like, you're so full of ego and you just think you're right.
Yeah, I realize we are attacking the attackers.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Oh.
let's consider this our vent session. And
Yeah.
for me, oh my gosh, I really want to follow what's happening with this ghost photography. It's so amazingly cool.
I'm
Um,
curious. I actually need to check that.
yeah. Um,
That actually, this brings something here as well. Like for me, this is funny how things plays out, but it's also a good exercise. Just because, like, we think something is wrong doesn't mean that we have the answer.
yeah.
Doesn't mean that we have to have the answer. Like we are posing more questions here, and even us getting to the consciousness, ah, we are attacking the attackers. This is interesting.
With ad hominem remarks, I called them morons. Yeah.
True. This, you see, this is how I hope reality is. That we are able to make fun and notice where we are as well, and um, not have to say like you're wrong and we're right, and it's like, can we just ask more questions and have a conversation instead of closing the conversation because I'm so protective of my worldview.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for my like insight this week, I'd like to breathe and laugh when I feel that feeling of holding so closely to my worldview and feeling threatened by something I'm hearing, reading, seeing, being exposed to.
I like that because I actually been questioning some things of my worldview and reality as well. And
Ooh, intriguing.
I'm gonna give the example because this is something that I believe a lot of people might think as well. Um, I'm as a Virgo, I have the tendency of, if I agree with someone, we're meeting at 8 p.m. We're meeting at 8 p.m. I'm not expecting you to come 8:30. I'm not expecting you to come 8:40. I'm waiting. Actually, I'm waiting 10 minutes earlier. Right? So, and I don't like to be waiting. I really don't. Even worse when someone says like, "Oh, I'm not coming anymore because something else happened." It happens. Sometimes it happens. When it's all the time, I don't like that,
Yeah.
and that's a boundary. But I've been questioning. Okay, so if I'm trying to understand the nature of reality, and I'm often telling myself, but time is an illusion and everything happens in divine timing. What happens to my tie to this is the time that we agreed on? This is a, and I don't have the answer. This is a question that I've been putting on myself. Am I too attached to the 3D model when I'm waiting on time instead of going a little bit more with the flow of things, or not? And I have a teacher that has been talking about some of these things as well. And the thing that he mentioned that got me thinking, oh, yeah, maybe that's what I should be doing. And I'm trying to play with that. Was that when these things that we couldn't prepare for happen. For example, you agreed to meet someone at one time and something else happens and so on. He says that someone who's in the 5D would be doing something else and say like, oh, actually it was even better because I got to do this and this and that. So I'm like, okay, how can I not be too attached to time as well?
Yeah. Yeah, this feeling that it's extra time for you. I used to host a book club, and we would like meet at somebody's house, and whoever's house it was, you'd cook dinner and everybody come over and we talk about the book, and it was really fun. And one time everybody's supposed to come over to my house and they were all late. Everybody messaged, I'm late, I'm late, I'm late, I'm late. And here I was, I'd made dinner and I cleaned my house and I was really excited. And I had this moment where I was very frustrated, and it really took it personally. I was like, they can't be bothered. They don't care, all of this. And I asked, I wish I could remember the adjective, but I asked like something like, what would a fun person do?
Mm.
And I was like, the book we were reading at the time was the Iliad by Homer. and I was like, a fun person would go get out some art supplies and illustrate her favorite part from what we read this time. And that's what I started doing. And so when other people showed up, I was like, I'm coloring my favorite part of what we read. Do you want to color your favorite part? And it was so cool to transplant myself into that different reality of like, what would the person do who was not angry and resentful and like, you're wasting, you don't value my time, and like all those, thoughts that came up. It was like, what if this time were for me?
Yeah.
And I would love to like be in that consciousness more where I could, and it ended up creating more fun.
Yeah.
They were like, what a cool idea. And I think the evening was it was probably one of the best meetings we had because it was flavored with, I'm just doing what I'm doing and enjoying myself. Oh, you guys are here? Cool. Then like we can enjoy life together. But
yeah.
I don't know if there's a question that would help. Like, what would a blank person do? What would it like? Remember last time I asked you, how would an enlightened person handle telemarketers?
Yes, that's you answered it. That's exactly what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Of course, there's different situations. There are times where you are waiting in a place where you can be coloring, which would be great.
Sure. Yeah, there's a frustration. I've had that frustration where it's like I left the work I was doing, which I would have happily continued doing, to meet you somewhere, and you didn't show up, or you showed up 20 minutes late. Not you, but like the person. It's like I would have much preferred to spend that time continuing on the project I was working on at home.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think the answer is in that. How can I be looking for how can I be enjoying myself instead of in a place of waiting? And even like the frustration frustration only consumes us, because other people, even if they say they are sorry, they're not the ones frustrated, right? Why would this is the question that I ask, like, why would I consume my mind space and my emotions with focusing on someone else who's not even here, when I can be focusing on how can I be enjoying this moment?
Yeah. I had to, after I got married, there's like a lot of paperwork involved. And so I found myself, there's one week where I had made all these appointments and I was like in all these government offices, and you're just waiting for a long time. And in one of them was like, I shifted from, oh my God, I'm waiting, I'm so bored, to, wait a minute, I've got like this whole uninterrupted chunk of time. I'm going to meditate. And I sat there in the Social Security office, and I made sure my purse was like, tucked in close to me, because I was going to close my eyes and be a little bit, like not as aware. and I meditated, and it was a great meditation. It felt wonderful, but it felt extra wonderful that I went, I'm not waiting. Like, I'm not identifying as waiting. I'm identifying as I've got at least 20 minutes of uninterrupted time right now. And what a gift.
That I feel like that's what makes me frustrated sometimes. It's not knowing if I'm not going to be interrupted.
Ah, well,
If
see,
I
then
know someone is going to be 30 minutes late, I'm like, yay, I have 30 minutes for me. But if, like, are you coming in a minute, in 10 minutes, in 20 minutes?
yeah, that
Actually,
seems, yeah,
I
that,
had friends come by when I was meditating because I got tired of waiting and I decided to meditate.
yeah, then they get to wait for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But I think there's something really key there too, because it's, um, do I have to be the person who's always waiting? You know, oh, I waited some for them and now I'm doing something. And then, okay, now they can wait for me.
Yeah.
Like a releasing of being the one who has to be responsible to make sure that the plan goes through.
Yeah.
I wonder if that would be
It's a
enjoyable.
good
Like
release. It's a good release.
uh leaning into trust. I trust that we'll make this meeting happen.
But I like the idea of coloring, my favorite part of a book.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it means you just bring a coloring book and some crayons
I,
with you
I
wherever you
might
go.
sing my favorite part of a book because that doesn't require the coloring stuff.
Oh, wait, say again.
I might sing the favorite part of a book because that doesn't require the coloring stuff. I can sing
Ooh.
anywhere.
Ooh. That sounds really neat. I like that.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because it's so frustrating to be kept waiting. And yet, at the same time, for me anyway, it feels like there's never enough time.
Yeah.
So, noticing when do I have the gift of time?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm going to see if I remember this week. I didn't remember last week, but I'm going to see if I remember this week to just breathe and laugh when I notice myself in that agitated state of needing to prove somebody wrong.
Yeah. And I'm gonna catch myself on the moments where I get caught up with the time as well, since the Big Bang might not be there, and then time might not be there either.
Might be there for some people and not for others. Yeah. So let
True.
us know in the comments. Are you gonna, take up one of these activities? Do you feel incited into action? That is why we're here to, bring insights for ourselves, for anybody listening, and then incite ourselves and anybody listening into action so we can dismantle those assumptions one by one.
Yeah. And vent a little bit as well.
Yeah, felt good. Need to get that off my chest.
Feel free to vent in the comments.
Oh,
Take care, everyone.
yeah, thanks.
Until next time.
See you next time.